Three, two, one. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Tomes and Tunes. I am your host, Arielle Silver, and we have been doing this for now 29 weeks. Today is week 29, talking books and swapping songs with songwriters from all over the world. But today's guest, Luis Oliart, is kind of right down the street from me. He's, maybe a couple miles down the street, but really, really close. He might, in fact, be one of my closest guests. Very excited to have him on the show. Now he is a songwriter, he is a composer, and he is an activist, and I'm excited to talk with him about that. If you are just joining, please jump in the chat box and say hi. I would love to see you, and feel free to ask questions as we go through the show. And what else should I tell you? Oh, I'll tell you right off the bat that this is week 29, the week before Thanksgiving. Next week there will be no Tomes and Tunes, but we will be back the week after. So let me bring Luis Oliart on, and thank you for being here. And thank you for being here, Luis. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you so much for being on the show today. As I was telling you, we were chit-chatting, as we always do, a little bit backstage before the show started, and 29 weeks of this, connecting with songwriters from all over the place. I think you, that's really funny, but I think you are maybe one of the closest in proximity to me right now. But you are in your home, right?
Yeah, I'm in my kitchen because it sounds ambient here.
Ooh, very
Yeah,
nice. Thank you for that. We've got some nice lighting behind, ambient
No,
sounds. It's
well, I
perfect.
have a music studio in my living room right over there, but for this kind of forum, it's better to play in here. That's why.
What is life looking like for you in this year of 2020 with COVID and everything? Has your life changed? Are you spending a lot more time at home, or have you been out in the world?
Well, I've been out in the world because I do a lot of activism in the community. So I, I've done a lot of that. As far as my musical life, I'm a live musician. I mean, interacting with people is something I've done since I was 12, and I've always loved that aspect of it, and so I miss that. So I'm not playing live like all of us. So that's one thing. I've done a few things recently where it's a controlled environment, but for the most part, I'm playing a lot, as much as I ever have. But it's been in a recording capacity here. And then if I do play live, I've been a teacher for like 20 years. That's probably a third of my income to keep the edge off, surviving as an artist. And I'm a good teacher. I love teaching. And so I've got some pretty competent young people, and they keep you alive, and it's safe here. We keep a safe environment. So sometimes I'm on the drums, or I'm on the bass, or I'm on guitar. So I'm playing live, so to speak, that way.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, that's been pretty much kind of it. And some the outside is just bike rides, and like everybody else, doing something.
Yeah, I've been getting on bike rides with my sweetheart a couple of times every week and going for walks as much as possible. It's just keeping my sanity to do that for
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. Yes.
I love how you just said you teach about a third of your income, and you use the phrase keep the edge off, and it's an interesting thing, making a career as an artist of any kind, as a musician specifically, but all different ways that the different creative ways that we sort of piece together, puzzle together, or work out the puzzle of how to do it. So you teach and you are a composer as well. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, on the composing side, well, to answer your question, I mean, when I say take the edge off, because you know what it's like to be when you're solely making your income for your art. And I'm old enough to remember playing San Diego in 1991, man, and making $100, and then fast forward to 2019 and playing the local bars, and guess what? You're making $100. So none of that has changed. So you have to, if I've been my greatest art form has been surviving as a musician for all the putting a kid through college, and I raised a wonderful son here, and did all that through music. So you have to diversify, and the edge off is to not be in a desperate place where you can make the music you wanted to make and stay true to the things that make you feel good, versus in the in the old days when I was a bass player, only, my 20s, I mean, you'd take any gig that came up, But I learned a lot then too.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
was cool.
Yeah, I'm right there with you with the diversification. I own a online yoga studio, and I also do a lot of different things. And the goal, I think, is to cobble together the things that are creatively satisfying or spiritually satisfying, or feel like it's contributing in some positive way to the world. I see Dulcie pop in. Hi, Dulcie. She was a guest on the show a few weeks ago. Great to see you. And Dulcie, you're asking, why is it still $100? And that is a really great question. It's funny. Some things constantly change, and some things just stay the same.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It,
um,
the composing aspect you asked me about, most of my is songwriting compositions, and then instrumentally, I'm a musician, so I play bass and I play guitar and lead guitar and those things. So for me, whether it's a song or an instrumental song or a vocal song, it's writing. And I have a buddy of mine, he's a composer, John Carta, and a couple other guys that I've befriended. So sometimes they'll need help specifically in like blues rooted things, and they want to keep some authenticity to it. And I'm certainly not, coming off the fields in the Delta, but I understand and I like to teach and I know about the blues, and I've studied that language a lot, and it connects with me. So I get most of the composition things that I'm involved with is bringing that element, rootsy music, to a composer's more contemporary composition, for film or television with the textures and loops and things. And then
yeah.
I play the same blues riffs that I do whether I'm in church or at an Irish bar, Same guy. No, it's true. It's true. Yeah.
You literally just reminded me of a dream I had last night where I
Oh,
was in an
wow.
Irish bar.
Yeah.
It was a bar in Boston called The Burn, if anybody out there is a Bostonian. Gosh, you just reminded me of that dream. That is so funny.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before that you started playing music when you were 12.
Yeah.
Where were you living when you were 12? Where did you grow up?
Well, I was living in Orange County because I was born in Inglewood, California. And in those days, it got to the point where walking home was becoming a little bit dangerous from school. When I was a little kid, this is in the 70s. And Orange County, my mom could get a cheaper home in Orange County, so she moved us to Orange County. So I was 12 in a gym class, and, this prepubescent kid, everyone was towering over me, and I happened to be between Dave Pedrosa, who was like this Hispanic Adonis, who was a songwriter and still a friend to this day, and then Jason Buklowski, who was like this surfer dude who was like a god, and they were both 2 years older than me. So, from 7th to 9th grade as a child, that's a huge span. And so they're the coolest guys. They're the musicians, the school a concert was coming up, the talent show, and they of course were singing and playing guitar, and they had this crazy 21-year-old drummer, and they needed a bass player, and they just both of them kind of looked down one day, because I always got along with them, and I was so shy, I kept my clothes on. Everyone's like nude around you, you're like, whoa, man, I can't compete with this right now. So, and then they looked down at me one day and go, you want to play bass? And I said, what's a bass? And fortunately, I did have music because of my father. He was into music. My mom was into music, predominantly like black music, soul music, things that were very soulful. And so I had that in me. And then they just took me to the house, and I, learned Train Kept a Rollin' or an Aerosmith song, or it was in those days, Dave was into punk and Jason was into acid rock. And so for me, music, and it's always been that way for me, I was just making a living. I always just did my best to play the thing and play whatever seemed appropriate,
I just have such a picture of you with these two guys on either side of you, and
Gorgeous men.
They're just so cool. They're cool guys, and you're just like, yeah,
Wait.
sure, I'll play bass with you.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, the truth is music, and I do this with some of my students. In some ways, my mom was working, and and we didn't have a lot of bread, so she did what she had to do as a mom in those days, and she was a single mom, and I had a sister, my sister and everything, and so I was an okay student, I got my work done, and that wasn't a big deal at that phase of my life, so I had time on my hands, and so music kind of saved me. All of a sudden, I was in this cool, I'm playing backyard parties in like 81, man, with people like way older than me, and I shouldn't have been there, but I'm like slam circles, and I was there, and riot police with riot gears, because of that punk scene in those days. It was such a, oh my God, society is crumbling, it's crumbling. Police, we're in Orange County, and they break up the party, and or then I'd be playing, in a rock band or something, at the local clubs and stuff as a kid.
Wow, that paints such a picture. And I have to confess that when I was 12 years old, I knew where California was, but I
Right,
could not have told you which was, even when I was 21, just to reverse those numbers, even when I was 21, I'm pretty sure I didn't know which was north and which was south, San Francisco or Los Angeles. And so here
right.
you were like growing up in this scene down in
Yeah,
SoCal, and that
yeah,
really paints an awesome picture. Really
yeah,
fun.
yeah. I guess the only other formative thing I think worth mentioning was that I had a stepmother who was friends with the secretary from Jerry Buss's secretary, who owned the Forum in those days. And you're talking about the 80s. And so again, because I was okay in school, I got my work done. I would go like on a school night, and they would all go hang out in the Forum Club, and I'm not saying my stepmother was involved, but in those days, just all of that was all around. But I wasn't, and they'd sit me down at prime seats right where you enter out of the Forum Club into the Forum, and I saw like the Kinks, Stevie Wonder, Rush, Yes, Van Halen, in the early days, just Queen. I mean, and Tom Petty. Tom Petty just right after Breakdown came out the first time. You know what I mean? And so you're just sitting there, and I really wasn't playing a whole lot then, but I mean, that was in my face all the time. So you saw what a show was supposed to be, and how a guy with an acoustic guitar like Ray Davies, for example, from the Kinks, whether I was a big Kinks fan or not, it was undeniable live how good they were. He was tall, he'd do this, and he'd run up and down, on stage, and just captivate the audience. It was a great way
You
to
didn't you
grow
didn't
up.
really have a choice. I mean, with that kind of background and those
Yeah,
kinds of experiences, you really had no choice. You were like, yeah,
yeah,
you were going to go into music.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So when did how'd you get into songwriting? So those two guys, you ended up playing bass and all that stuff, but when did you start doing the songwriting thing?
Well, Dave Pedrosa he was always a poet kind of guy, and I'll be honest with you, the poetry of that, I'm always working trying to be the better poetry guy. He was always the one who was into Bowie and Lou Reed and Generation X, which was Billy's idol band before he was solo. So I heard songs, and he was the song guy. He wasn't so much into like the Led Zeppelin, man, which have great songs too, but it was a different kind of a thing. And so that was my first experience of how important that was. But the truth is, it wasn't until um, my son was probably maybe about 1990 or so. I remember just writing down some stuff that my family was going through and things like that. And it was almost like therapeutic. I'd backed so many people up as a bass player, and you just kind of had to do it. I wasn't going to say I was possessed, man, but I was hearing melodies, and I just wrote it down, and I wrote this tune called Alice Don't Cry. Alice, don't cry, sister, we'll get by now. We all regret the times, but you don't have to go. There's still a good little melody and stuff, and that was it. And then my son was born when I was probably 30, and at that time, so I couldn't be a bass player all the time. And so then I grabbed the acoustic guitar, because instead of going out on tour and stuff, I could just go and play the local scene. And you had to have some songs, you know. And I had to play, so I needed some material, man. So I became like an acoustic guy, and that evolved later to become electric and all kinds of stuff, And I've designed my career based off of that.
It's so funny listening to you talk about your beginnings and how this evolved for you, and the energy around it is so very different from my own experience and where I came from, which was it feels so much for me when I'm thinking back on my past, so much quieter and controlled. My musical origins were really in band and orchestras, and throughout college I was a classically trained clarinet player, and so most of the settings in which I was playing music were in concert halls. They were the audience was quiet, and there would be applause at the end, but you could hear a pin drop when the music was in those pauses and in those silences, and that is such contrast to being in the rock club and being around the bands and just the whole scene around that is so different. And then when I started songwriting, it was very much I needed I needed I needed music, but I needed music in a different way from that sitting in the chair in the orchestra in the concert hall. I needed to be in my bedroom with my journal, and it did originally start with expressive writing, but it was me trying to find my own voice versus the voice of what's on the page and what's needed in the service of the bigger ensemble in that way. And
Right.
it's so, like, as you're talking about it, like, it feels so exciting and a lot of energy around it, and I'm thinking back to my own quieter, some of it was like chamber music, quartets and quintets, or I played Renaissance music, so it was just like the really simple sounds of the recorders, and the
Right.
viola da gambas. And so I love how music is just this, there's a whole galaxy that could be called music. And
Right.
you have like the plant life version of music, and then you have the animal kingdom of music, and the mineral of music. It's so interesting.
Yeah, but it sounds like, we're coming from the same place where it just wherever you were at in your life, you kind of had to you wrote something down, and you assembled it, and
Yeah.
it's always been a form of something therapeutic for me. It was always something I did, and I just kept doing it. And then all of a sudden you look back and it's 10 years have gone by, and it's like, wow, I got a body of work, man. And I got a record, and I learned how to record. And
Yeah.
then, I got signed much later. I was signed in bands that I was playing with, but they had other writing springs in those bands, that were, and so it wasn't until later in life that I even got signed. I'm an overnight success. Yeah,
Yeah, it just takes a lifetime to get there, right?
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. So what was that like for you when you got signed? Why did you? I'm assuming that you made some kind of conscious shift. You decided you wanted to get signed and pursued that, or what was that like for you? How did that? Why did you make that shift, or how did that happen?
Well, it was just a normal. The truth is, Arielle, is that I had a son, and so I started. Well, by the time I hit 30, music, and you and I talked about this a little bit beforehand, it wasn't as good as it was supposed to get. You know what I mean? In that life, and I'd seen a lot. I'd seen the world and stuff, and so I started working outside of music, and never stopped playing. I was always gigging at night and stuff like that. But it just kind of, once my son was born, my first priority was I was going to be the best father I could, and then the shift was, well, if I'm going to be the best father I could, I better get this together. You know what I'm saying? I better, if I want to keep doing this, because playing this and being an artist and teaching and working from home, I was present. I was a present father. And for a little bit, in his early stages of life, I was the operations manager and running divisions of companies, trucking and pressure and all this stuff, and making a lot of money, and they were getting their money's worth. I'll tell you, learned a lot, but I wanted to go back. So I think the shift was a natural evolution, and just kind of not being so hung up on, I got to be like, man, monetarily, this has got to be it for me, man, or otherwise I'm a failure. And I kind of let go of that and started just kind of doing it, and then just kept getting better at it. And the Central Coast, Dulce, and
Yeah.
the community that accepted me the most in what I did as an acoustic, one man kind of show guy, was the Central Coast. It was above and beyond me how much that community embraced me. And then so my labels from there, George and Awful's from there, and Cliff Stepp really was a pivotal part of becoming my marketing guy. And it was Cliff that ended up introducing me to George and saying, look, this guy's really trying to do it. And prior to those guys, it was Steve Key who held the songwriters circle, Songwriters That Play program. And Steve was a huge supporter. So I would just get in my car from LA and drive to the Central Coast to make $100. And but it was all worth it, and then that was the shift.
Yeah. We're just so lucky here in California that no matter whether it's $100 or what, we're ending up in beautiful places. I love the Central Coast. It is just gorgeous up there.
Yeah.
So lucky you that you've gotten to spend some time up there.
Yeah, they're awesome there. It's a good place. Good place.
So, Luis, you and I talked a little bit about literature when you
Yes.
were behind the scenes, and this is Tomes and Tunes. So I should ask you, what do you have? What would you like to share with us? What have you
Well,
been reading?
I have a couple of books, and showing my kids, I'm showing my age. It happens. I used to read a set list while I was standing or lyrics. Those days are gone. Now it's glasses, a light, and something right in front of me, so I try to remember the words. But the first book here is Widowish. Can you see that?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of, a little bright. Yeah. And it's written by my girlfriend, Melissa Gould, and it comes out in February on Amazon, and you can pre-order now. I've got this all right.
So we're getting a sneak peek here.
You are getting a sneak peek, yes. And my girl, she's a young widow. Her husband, who I knew, died of West Nile virus with some complications with MS and such. And I knew her. I used to teach Melissa's daughter, and I knew Joel, who passed away at a young age. And so he used to sit literally in this he used to sit in this chair and watch me teaching his daughter. So after a while, this was back in 2013, and then Melissa and I, a year later or so, got together, and I watched her develop and go and try to get back into writing again. Watch her going through her own grief period, and watching her write essays and get in the LA Times. I mean, it was really inspiring. I know it's your girlfriend or your significant other and you want to be proud of them, but as an artist, it was cool to watch her go through her whole process. And so she wrote a book about that whole story and meeting me after Joel's death and being a only parent and things like that. So I'm going to read a little bit from that.
Please do.
Okay. There was an exception about the widow. Was I sad enough? Was it okay to see me smile? Was I allowed to feel happy? I felt like I was failing at widowhood. I missed my husband, but no one knew that when they looked at me, they just saw a mom with blonde highlights going to yoga, picking up her daughter from school, buying groceries at Trader Joe's, and now I was at a party with a date when I should have been home grieving all alone. I didn't look like a widow, I wasn't acting like a widow, but I felt like a widow. I guess I was just widowish. And that, in essence, is what the book's about.
That right there is intriguing. Intrigues me to read it. Yeah, grief is a funny thing, and it's funny today in particular. I think the first thing I read this morning was a beautiful passage that another songwriter composer I know, he wrote about his brother's passing, and it's kind of funny that you bring that in today as well. And grief is just such a it's like we all go through it. Every single person, I imagine, experiences grief multiple times in their lives and in different ways, and yet there's it's incredibly individual. so that passage that you just read just speaks to that. And as a person who loves reading memoir and loves reading about how others experienced a difficult thing in their life and got through it, I'm intrigued to know a little bit more about that story, how she navigated, she felt widowish, how people interacted with her, and how interesting for you to have known her when Joel was alive, and then also through the writing of that book, and then
Yeah,
still now, through the publication of the book.
yeah. So it's I'm proud of her, and I can honestly, I read the book because when your significant other is the writer, you're reading through drafts and things like that, and it's art. It was a first time experience for me because I'm not being just kind here. I mean, she's a skilled writer. She's got a natural ability at it, and then she's also wrote 90120 and Lizzie McGuire and Party of Five and those television shows. She was a Bill Nye the Science Guy. She was involved in all of those things. So this is her first memoir, and
Yeah.
so it was just a great experience to. So that's why I read it, and even reading it. Knowing the story, I mean, I shed a tear a few times based off the fact that she just writes really well, and it resonates with you outside of like, is it good, honey? You're like reading this thing and you're going, wow, that's, I'm sorry, baby. And then you also, as a couple, you learn more things about each other through the words she put on the page.
Yeah.
I'm in the book too. My name's Marcos in the book. Don't tell anybody. Okay.
I'll keep it a secret.
Okay.
Just you, me, and Facebook and YouTube. We won't tell anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I teach a course every fall at Antioch University called Sources of Creativity, and the courses this year, it's on Wednesday evenings. So I was, with my students last night, and we were talking about every week we talk about creative process and different aspects of it, and creativity research. And somehow the conversation last night led us to talking about sad stories and sad songs, and just sad movies, sad things that are sad. And one of the students was sort of questioning why would anybody want to watch or read or listen to an expression of sadness? How would that lift their spirits if they're sad? And there is, I think, some of the other students in the class were like, yeah, I understand. Like, I want to read sad things when I'm sad because it does help me not feel alone. It helps when you read beautiful writing and it brings a tear. Even sometimes I'll read something and I'm just like, many, many, many tears, and something about that I think heals a piece in us, even if our stories are entirely different than the story that we're reading in the book. If it touches some similar sadness inside of us, it starts to stitch it a little bit together, just knowing we're not the only one experiencing that emotion.
Yeah, I mean, what was that Leonard Cohen line? This great, your most personal statement is your most universal statement. I think that was Cohen that said that, and tying into composition and things like that. I always felt if you see it, anything beautiful generally doesn't it have a little element of sadness in it, as opposed to something that's maybe cute or pretty, but beauty has got, lots of. And now I'm going to show how strange I am. Is the same thing like when you're putting your set list together and you put a slow. You ask why would someone want to read something sad? That's what I'm addressing here. Is that if you're playing a slow, something in that tempo, and then the next song, if it's ba-dum ba boom ba, it's brighter because of what was placed in front of it. It complements the next thing if we're showing the relativity of those kinds of things.
Yeah, I was just having a great
I'm a
conversation.
weirdo. I'm a weirdo. Okay.
No, I was having having a great conversation with Dan Navarro, the songwriter, the other night, and we were talking about the juxtaposition of deeply sad songs and then the levity of the in between song banter, and humor and being funny and light, really bringing the lightness in contrast to the heaviness of
Yeah,
something else, and that's really what you're talking about. These two, placing these two songs, back to back.
yeah,
Yeah, love that. Did you also had a poet that you were talking about, and
sure.
I'm kind of curious about that. Yeah.
Well, the poet is Kim Fields. I call her Poetry Girl. She's a woman and her wife come to my shows at the Red Door, and that's how I met them. And Kim just happened to be there, and I've backed up a lot of songwriters. I have backed up a lot. I mean, and as a musician, instead of playing like the heavy punk thing or that, I think adaptability has always been something that I've been good at. With the songwriter, when you're backing up, especially the female songwriter, where it's just you kind of want to catch their breath. So you're not playing something that's like jamming. What are you doing? I'm trying to sing a song here, and you catch their breath. Well, she happened to be at the Red Door, and her wife encouraged her to get up there and do something. So I put down this really wide open cup, three chords, simple. And this wasn't the particular poem she read, but she's cool. I mean, if I was half as cool as her, I'd be the coolest guy in the room. And so anyway, so she wrote she assembled all her poems. I think it's a self-published book. It's called Evolution. And I'm a big fan of hers as a person. She's my friend. And I'm really proud that this is a literary forum, and I know these authors. It's really great.
Yeah.
So, and I'm an activist, and so this generally with people below the poverty line, and I do a lot of help to get resources to getting people off the streets in my neighborhood. This particular poem is about homelessness. It's called Reflection Stone. Walking alone on the road to riches, turned over shoes and hole-ridden visions. Walking alone on street-lit runways with voices of disgrace questioning my safety. I look at your loving faces, but I die inside when you see my eyes. I no longer cry. I continue to hide. Why would you extend your hand to feed my faith? I can no longer believe in my dreams. The credits are rolling. I lay my head on concrete pillows, looking up at undressed dolls and banana joes, seeking to grab hold of your kindness as you bend your toes, walking up platforms for that quiet ride where rest resides in lighted tunnels, where no one sees me when clutching their laptop cases, sleepwalking through life's phases. Hear my existence. Ask me where went my innocence. I want to bless conscious ears with the voice of a displaced soul. Are you aware that I am the fear you fight in daydreams? To be so vulnerable in a world of despair. Characterize your principles with the coins that you share. I am second to one. He does not wear leather loafers. He wears courage and honor like buttons on a vest. You roll your eyes when I beg for understanding. Freedom was my liquor while you boasted of righteousness. License revoked for judging my undercoat. I thankfully lost my mind a while ago. But now, when I see fires, I choke on the smoke. Remember to bend your knees when you see tall buildings, for there lies the fallen you sometimes envy.
Hmm. Hmm. A few weeks ago, I was out with my sweetheart, delivering some food and water and blankets and things like that to people who don't have homes, who live under the overpasses, probably between where you live and where I live. And I'm interested to know a little bit about the activism work that you do, and are you out on the streets? Are you advocating in, you know, um, in meetings? What kind of work do you do?
Generally speaking, I'm a volunteer, and
Mm-hmm.
my work currently is for the NoHo Home Alliance, which is a community organization. That's the hub. The headquarters is St. Matthew's Church, and they have a program called the Drop-In Program. And that's the brainchild of that was Reverend Stephanie Yeager, PhD. So I directly report to the Reverend. She's also a person who's she writes. She's a great writer, and she's was born in Washington D.C. So she's understands government and things like that. So basically, my work could be involved with working with the political powers that be on the city, state, county, and federal government specific to our district too, and designing systems that bridge the gap between social services and streets. And then a lot of times in order to get that work done, my work is to go and help those that need the help. And when I'm over there, and for example, I always come with a backpack and a thing of water and a granola bar, and then basically resources, because I ran a emergency food provider, the North Hollywood Interfaith Food Pantry. It was a coalition of churches and temples for 40 years. It distributes 30 feet from my door here. And I ran that for a decade and knew I needed to get away from, though I believe in the pantry's mission, project-based learning for kids and all of those things. I mean, I'm so proud of the pantry, but I knew I needed to demote myself really to get free to use the credibility I had with families and all the people in the neighborhood to go and, fight for a healthy community. And so I do a lot of case studies. So when the county, for example, is saying, this is what you do, and you go on this link and you do this and that. Well, I may talk to the outreach workers that are doing the work, that are in the tents that I run into. I might talk to the people on the streets, and I'll assemble a case study of 10 people, and I'll assemble that information, and then I'll go and I'll pressure test what's being stated and say, this is what's working, this is what's not, and I might forward that information to support a state audit of that area of, let's say, criminal reentry or something like that. So it's on the streets, and I'm helping people, but I'm also acquiring data so that I could have a hammer of information to get in there and what I call shock to the system or disruption, to break something open so that it can be reassessed and really create progressive change. Get money down to the people that need it. Get it decentralized, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. Here, what we were doing was, just starting at the most obvious and just trying to help person to person, but really it's a system wide,
Yeah.
effort that's really where you make widespread change. So awesome. Really great.
Yeah. But you have to talk to the people that are receiving the help. So the
Right.
work, when you say just that, I'm telling, that's where it's at. I mean, treating somebody humanely and not letting your community, I'm not trying to get all self-righteous on you, but I can't walk with my girl and go to the, a local restaurant and be stepping over some guy that's not even conscious of what, just, laying there, whatever may be going on with him and can't help himself. And sure, there's some criminal element there, and that's a whole other aspect of it. But, people, there's positions and agencies and government things that are supposed to be taking care of that. So I'm just making sure they're doing their job. That's all.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Speaking of which,
Yeah.
maybe that's a good segue actually to this passage from, this is from Rebecca Solnit's, The Faraway Nearby. She writes, kindness, compassion, and generosity are often talked about as though they're purely emotional virtues, but they are also, and maybe first of all, imaginative ones. You see someone get hurt, maybe they get insulted or they're just very tired, and you feel for them. You take the information your senses deliver, and interpret it, often in terms of your own experience, until it becomes vivid to you. Or you work harder and study them to imagine the events you don't witness, the suffering that is not on the surface. It's easier to imagine the experience of people most like you and nearest you, your best friend, the person who just slipped on the ice. Through imagination and representations, films, printed stories, second-hand accounts, you travel into the lives of people far away. This imaginative entering into is best at the particular, since you can imagine being the starving child, but not the region of 1,000,000 starving people. Sometimes, though, one person's story becomes the point of entry to larger territories. And that last sentence is exactly what you were just saying, which is so interesting. Sometimes one person's story becomes the point of entry to larger territories.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. She is so brilliant, Rebecca Solnit. She's just, I think, one of our, brilliant and articulate thinkers and writers of the day. You have an instrument there, which I think it might be time for a song.
Okay. Let's. Yeah. Do a little music. All right.
And I just want to give a shout out to Mark and Dulcie and Jim and Cliff, and I know a few other people are watching. Shane and Marty and Don and Bonnie, Scott, Terry, Courtney. Nice to see you all. Thank you for being here. Feel free to say hi in the chat box if you haven't already. We'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to shut my mic off now and just sit back and listen.
No, that's all right. So we got a little crowd. I didn't know. Now I'm all nervous. You got me all nervous. Well, I heard a lot of Central Coast people there. So look, I'm playing a national, right? I can't get okay. It's from that area, this guitar in particular. Anyways, this is from a 2010 record. This is called Broken Chains. Somehow the hurt don't show, and I know that time won't heal no matter where I go. The days go by like the links on a broken chain. I run so far, but the voice in my head is the same, and I walk this earth like a man on a one-way train. Restless dreams on a cold dark night turn my head to the light. Them songs that play that never stop, somehow the words ain't right. I know them changes will come if I stick to my guns and be the man who face the pain, or remain the same man, the man in the broken chains. Broken chains. I wait for the Savior to find me and wash me clean. But daylight comes like a jailer with a silver key, and the ties that bind are my own. I'm just a man in need. man in the broken chains. The broken chains. In the broken chains. In the broken chains. Yay!
Thank
Yeah.
you. Oh, I like those words a lot. Man in the broken chains, and just the vibiness of the bluesy guitar. Just great. Love that.
Yeah, it's an open C. Yeah. That riff is I co-wrote that song with Craig T. Fall. He's like a big brother to me, and he played with he was in Glenn Campbell's band as a second guitarist and played piano, and he was in Stevie Wonder's band at 16. He was touring with Stevie Wonder, and he's from Burbank. You know what I mean? I mean, if he was any whiter, he'd be clear. And this was a guy, such a soul. No, I'm serious. He's such a great guitar player, and so he and I wrote like 3 or 4 songs together that I was very proud of, and that was one of them. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for playing that one, sharing that one on this show.
Yeah.
I've been uncertain. I've had such a one of those weeks where I've been spinning a million miles in a million different directions all at once. And when I picked up my guitar for this show today, I wasn't exactly sure, but I think I'm gonna do this one. This is a song called "Fine by Yourself." I wrote this at the beginning of 2020, before COVID. I was thinking about maybe divorce is a rite of passage for everybody at this point in time, but I had been thinking back to my own divorce, and I had been thinking about you know, that time after getting through all that, when I was living in, you know, I had my own apartment, and it was me and the cat, and I would come home at the end of the day, and I'd put Miles Davis on, and I'd pour myself a glass of wine, and I would sit down with a book on the couch, and it was just me and the cat, and it was so great. It was just such a lovely, like, slice of time in my life, a really unique time that I still, when I think back to it, hold it as a really sacred time. And so I was thinking about that time when I wrote this song, "Fine by Yourself." Not recorded and still working it out, but here we go. Can you hear that?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
One second here. There we go. When you blink your eyes at the yellow stripe of sunrise through the curtain, when you stretch your limbs in an X across the bed, when you rise without alarm clocks ringing, catch yourself in the kitchen singing, put daffodils in water on the shelf. Yourself. When you dust the bike and pump the tires, throw an apple in your bag. When you pedal down some street you never knew. When you notice how the season's turning, notice how your heart's not yearning. In fact, you're feeling rather well. Ooh, you're doing fine by yourself. Funny how you thought the world would year's done and you're back at home with a jelly jar of wine, when you're curled up on the sofa with a book, you realize that for all your fears there's a tenderness you're finding here on the flip side of farewell. You thought you'd never live to tell. You're doing fine by yourself. You're doing fine by yourself.
Beautiful, beautiful. Check you out in that big dreadnought guitar. That's got a great tone. What a great wood tone.
Oh yeah,
awesome.
That's my Guild D55. That's traveled with me everywhere. I've had it for 20 years now. I think 19 years.
Yeah, well, mine. I have a Guild deal. I'll show it in a second. But yeah, your voice on top of that beautiful wide wood tone is perfect.
Thank you. Yeah.
Great
thank you very
combination.
much. And you know, little did I know when I wrote that song that "Fine by Yourself" that we were heading into a year where all of us would be, you know, by ourselves in a more significant and extreme way than, you know, for a lot of people than they had ever been before. You know, but
Yeah,
that's just
yeah.
the way the year played out. You know.
Yeah, I was cracking up when you were introducing the song, and you were going. I was reflecting on my divorce, and you and I both went. You know, the smiles that, you know, usually, no, we couldn't even help it. We were all like, wasn't it a liberating experience? You know, and most of us were like, so.
There's a there's a woman I know who I was in like a conversation with a few different people, and this one woman said that she's going through her divorce, and the other woman said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," and the other woman said, "No, this is fantastic. I'm really great about it." And it's, you know, it's funny, but you know, it is a loss either way and a big change, but you know.
Yeah. Well, I can think back to those. That's a long time ago for me. Yeah, you know, not so fresh is what I'm saying. That when they're fresh, oof, painful. Painful.
Yeah, but you look back on the time and you know, it's a time.
Yeah.
It's a time in the past. Luis, thank you so much for on the happy note of divorce.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being my guest today for my last Tomes and Tunes before Thanksgiving, and then the show's going to take a week break, and you know, this was a really nice way to end a long run. You know, really such a pleasure to have you on the show to talk about your activism and your life now, and just the creative journey, all the things that we spoke about. It was really great, enjoyable show for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for getting me. I'm around women who lit. It's a literary forum for women because of my girlfriend and stuff. And so I'm always setting stuff up, the lighting, making sure it's right. So this is the first time I want to thank you for getting this guy, you know, rough around the edges guy. And all of a sudden I'm getting an opportunity to read and things. You know, it was fun for me. And, you know, out of my normal wheelhouse, but I felt very comfortable here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. My job to get people out of their regular wheelhouse. Maybe that'll be my new slogan.
Take it.
Thank you so much. I'm going to say goodbye to everybody else, and thank you all for being here for another episode of Tomes and Tunes. Like I said, this was episode 29 with Luis Oliart. Please find his music. I put it in the show notes. You can find him on his website. You can find him on the streaming platforms. I've been listening to him a lot on Spotify, but you can find him on YouTube and the other places as well. And I, in fact, have a playlist. His song is right at the top at the moment, a Tomes and Tunes playlist. You can hear his music and the music of past guests as well. So that's that. I hope that you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving week. I hope that even in this year of unprecedented challenges, really strange times, I hope that for all of us, we can also reflect on some of the surprising gifts that this year has given us. And this opportunity to do this show and bring songwriters on has been one of the greatest gifts for me this year. When we come back the week after Thanksgiving, who is my guest? Oh, Dara Ackerman. She is a San Francisco songwriter and improv performer. And so I hope you will join me for that. I will be live streaming tomorrow at the usual time for Arielle's Acoustic Happy Hour, 5:30 tomorrow, 5:30 Pacific time, that is tomorrow, and every Friday, but not next Friday for Thanksgiving week. I'm going to take that day off as well. Until we meet again, take good care.